Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Alberta government said it made a mistake in rescinding the 1976 Peter Lawheed coal policy and is reinstating it once again. Environment Canada has issued an extreme cold warning for our region. We hear from EMS officials on how to best protect yourself in weather like this. And a Calgary lawyer says Canadians' rights and freedoms are being trampled on during the COVID-19 pandemic. John Carpe with the Justice Centre will have more.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government has reinstated the 1976 Peter Lawheed coal policy. This was after hearing concerns raised by Albertans about surface mining in the eastern slopes of the Canadian Rockies. The UCP government quietly rescinded the policy last May without public consultation. The Minister of Energy also issued a directive to the Alberta Energy Regulator so that no mountaintop removal will be permitted, and all of the restrictions under the 76 coal categories are to apply, including all restrictions on surface mining in Category 2 lands. Also, all future coal exploration approvals on Category 2 lands will be prohibited pending widespread consultations on a new coal policy. Energy Minister Sonia Savage says her government made a mistake in rescinding the 1976 coal policy.
An important part of being a responsible government is to admit when you've made a mistake and to fix it. And that's what we are doing here today. First, Alberta's government will reinstate the full 1976 coal policy. This includes the 4 land categories that determined where and how coal leasing, exploration, and development could occur. We recognize that rescinding this policy has caused tremendous fear and anxiety that Alberta's majestic eastern slopes would be forever damaged by mountaintop and open pit coal mining. Let me be clear, this will not happen in Alberta.
While many Albertans are happy about today's news, environmental groups say there are some loopholes. The Grassy Mountain Coal Project and other land development projects are on Category 4 land, not Category 2. They're awaiting government review to be green-lighted.
Reinstates some protections that new coal applications or new leases won't be sold in Category 2 lands. It doesn't affect some of the existing projects going forward, including Grassy Mountain and Tent Mountain and Montem Chinook. All of those are unaffected by this announcement today and will continue to move forward, as will the 6 other projects that will be allowed to continue their exploration activities in Category 2 lands. We don't want new mines in our Rocky Mountains. And then it's not just about Category 2 lands, it is about this entire landscape.
The province says it's working on plans to implement a brand new coal policy. The race to find a new leader for the Alberta Party will begin this spring. Nominations to succeed former leader Stephen Mendel will open May 25th and will close on August 31st. Now, the vote will be held on October the 23rd. The party earned 172,000 votes in the 2019 Alberta election, but failed to win any seats. That prompted party leader Mandel to step down. Jackie Fensky has been the interim leader since last February. Lethbridge police are investigating a suspicious death after the body of a man was found at a home in the 1200 block of 4th Avenue South on Monday morning. Police responded to the residence around 1:18 a.m. after receiving a report of someone screaming for help. They gained entrance to the residence and discovered the body of a 65-year-old deceased male. The case has been turned over to the Criminal Investigation Section. The investigation continues. A Canada-wide search warrant has been issued for an Edmonton man wanted in connection with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. The RCMP Major Crimes Unit needs your help finding 35-year-old Christian Niabarangu. He's described as black, 6'2", 240 pounds, black hair and brown eyes. The suspect has connections to Edmonton, North Battleford, Saskatchewan, and Montreal, Quebec. Police say if you've seen him, do not approach because he's considered armed and dangerous. But you can call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. It is bitterly cold here in southwestern Alberta. An extreme cold warning has been issued by Environment Canada. The AMA is reporting 5 to 6 times the normal call volumes today. Alberta Health Services is warning those of us who are deciding to venture outside during this cold day to really be careful. The Public Education Officer for the Emergency Medical Services within the AHS says there are tips you can use to protect yourself from frostbite and hypothermia.
Frostbite you can combat mainly by covering up as much skin as possible. And hypothermia, I mean dressing in layers. Should you work outside or commute or be outside for extended period of time, if you become too warm for whatever reason, you can take off a layer and reapply down the road. Very important as well for both, for hypothermia and frostbite, no matter what you're doing outside, but to ensure that you seek periodic breaks inside a warm place. So whether that be a building, a house, a vehicle, help your body stay warm, keep its homeostasis or regulated body temperature.
Loria says that frostbite only takes minutes to set in with any exposed skin. Some of the COVID-19 restrictions introduced in December were lifted today in Alberta. Restaurants can reopen for in-person dining for up to 6 per table from the same household. One-on-one workouts with a fitness instructor can resume. Sports and entertainment-related activities can resume in schools, and youth are able to once again take part in lessons and practices for team-based minor sports. Indoor gatherings, however, are still banned, and outdoor get-togethers are capped at 10. Coffee shops are one business that took advantage of today's new rules on indoor dining. Takeaway has become the norm, but as Ainsley O'Reilly explains, lifted restrictions are a win-win for these businesses and many of their customers.
Bread, Milk and Honey, as well as Saunders Coffee Bar, are among the many Lethbridge coffee shops that, as of today, are allowed in-person dining.
My favorite part about working at the cafe is just having people sit and enjoy the atmosphere.
Even just the first person who came in today, I was like, it's really nice to host people and just present what we do in a way that we get to see people enjoy it and how it's kind of meant to be enjoyed.
After 2 shutdowns, Saunders manager Michelle Robertson says the transition was easy because they didn't have to lay off staff. Contact tracing is in place and tables are 2 meters apart. Monday has been steady and positive as businesses navigate a gradual return to normal.
As soon as you have dine-in, that just really changes the atmosphere of our cafe, changes our sales, just really, you can see way more people out and about for sure.
Even though customers must be a part of one household or single individuals with 2 close contacts, dine-in coffee is for everyone and hopefully here to stay.
It's not just students that come here, it's not just retired folks. We have people of all walks of life that come here and spend time in the cafe, so having a place where they can do that is really important and helps the community come together. Obviously, we do have to make sure that we're doing it safely, but if we can, have those precautions in place, I think it's a fantastic gift that we're able to take advantage of.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The owners of Anytime Fitness locations are calling on provincial leaders and health officials to work toward reopening in 4 provinces. The business owners across Canada are sending letters to provincial leaders in Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec, where health clubs remain closed. They want to work with the provinces to establish province-approved safety and sanitation protocols, which will allow these fitness centers to fully reopen. Loris Alexander spoke with the owner of Anytime Fitness in Lethbridge about what they'd like to see moving forward.
Stage 1 has begun and allows for a partial reopening, allowing only one-on-one personal training and by appointment only.
You have to be masked up when you are not performing exercise, and if you do come in contact with another pair that is a personal training, you have to stay within 3 meters of them.
They have now amped up their cleaning measures and protocols for the safety of their members.
After COVID, you'll see we have all the plastic barriers in place. When people come in through the doors, it's hand sanitizing, it's COVID acknowledgement forms, and making sure people are aware. We just got upgraded to foggers, so now 3 times a day, all the equipment is actually being fogged now.
According to a survey done by the Fitness Industry Council, more than 50% of facilities surveyed said they would not survive another 2 months of closure.
For government, they're turning small business on, they're turning small business off. On a Canada-wide, the average fitness facility is losing $20,000 a month after government subsidies. The small business industry has been pushed to the brink, and I'm just not sure how much longer it can go on for, as well as this constant on-off. It's very costly to get it up and running. Right now, the one-to-one, it's not profitable. We're losing more money now than if we were to just stay closed.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
There's a lawyer in Calgary who says there's no justification for not allowing gyms to fully reopen in Alberta. John Carpe, who is the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, believe this is simply government overreach.
Right now, the gym owners, their choice is to comply or to open up and risk what I imagine, depending on which province, are very hefty fines. But there's no scientific justification for this. Typically, the people threatened by COVID, the people who should be afraid would be if you're 82 years old and you're in a nursing home and you're already dying of cancer, heart disease, emphysema, diabetes, whatever other illnesses, then you should be worried. These are not the same people who are going to the gym.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Carpe, who will also discuss how Canadians' rights and freedoms are being trampled upon during the pandemic. That's coming up later in our broadcast. Students in the Dillon School of Business at the University of Lethbridge now have access to a second bursary thanks to a $25,000 donation from Costco Wholesale Canada. Carissa Vandenhoek, now a third-year student majoring in accounting at the Dillon School of Business, says the bursary has allowed her to focus on her studies.
I'll work an 8-hour day and then I'll go home and I'll do schoolwork till like midnight. So every time I can get a scholarship, that's that much extra that I don't have to be here, and then I can spend on my studies. Another thing about scholarships is the higher your grades, often I find the more you will get. So if I have a scholarship, then I can study more and I can get more scholarships.
The bursary is given to a second-year Dillon School of Business student in financial need who completed their high school here in southern Alberta. Over 373,000 shoeboxes were packed by Canadians as part of the 2020 Operation Christmas Child Shoebox campaign. As Micah Quinn explains now, Lethbridge residents also rallied together to provide shoeboxes for kids who will be receiving them in both Central America and West Africa.
Albertans filled up 74,791 shoeboxes for children in need, with 2,365 of those shoeboxes coming from Lethbridge.
Those numbers are down a little bit, but given what 2020 was like and what 2021 is like so far as well, we absolutely expected this.
Samaritan's Purse always asks for shoeboxes to be loaded up with hygiene items, toys, and school supplies. King says that he's went to a few of the shoebox distribution events, and it's amazing to see the range of reactions when children open their shoeboxes.
Because you have some kids who are so excited. They're opening their stuff. They're showing things to their friends. They're bubbling. They're talking. Then there are other kids who will quietly open their shoebox. They'll look at it, and then they'll close the lid, and they won't look at it again until they get to take it home and show it to their parents and their siblings.
King says that the gospel impact is the main reason that drives the program forward.
The gospel is always number one, and we're so grateful for believers who also say the gospel's number one, and I don't care if there's a pandemic, I'm going to pack shoeboxes so children get hope and help and the offer of salvation in Christ.
Lethbridge residents can still pack shoeboxes for children in need year-round by going to packabox.ca. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
There are signs that once we get past this week, shipments of COVID-19 vaccines will ramp up. Government officials are only expecting around 70,000 doses of the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine to arrive in Canada, and not a single dose of the Moderna vaccine. With this week's new deliveries, there will be less than 250,000 doses available to be injected across Canada this week. Next week, however, officials are expecting around 225,000 doses, and Health Canada could approve the AstraZeneca vaccine later this week. There is mounting evidence to suggest that having a COVID-19 vaccine injection may not protect you from getting infected again, with some new variants emerging around the world.
It does look like reinfection is possible. I don't think we fully understand why that is and why immunity has not developed after natural infection. It does look like it's absolutely a minority of people. It does look like we induce good antibodies in the vast majority of people who get infected, but not all.
Alberta Health Services says it's working with the operators of a couple of meatpacking plants dealing with COVID-19 outbreaks. Olimal said there are close to 80 cases at its pork facility in Red Deer, and that one person died from the virus last month. Cargill, meanwhile, says 6 employees at its beef facility in High River have recently tested positive for COVID-19. They're now in isolation receiving medical care. The Cargill plant shut down for 2 weeks last April because of an outbreak that initially affected 350 of its 2,200 workers. New COVID-19 numbers continue to decline in Alberta. Over the past 24 hours, the province reported that only 269 new cases have been identified. 5 more Albertans have also died from the virus. There are currently 432 people in hospital battling the virus, along with 76 in intensive care. Across the province, there are 6,196 active cases. Here in the South Zone, there are just 319 active cases, including 177 in Lethbridge and just 14 in Medicine Hat. Fortunately, more than 119,000 Albertans have now recovered from the novel coronavirus. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says she's happy to see the cases continue to trend downward.
Our positivity rate currently stands about 4.3%. The R value in Alberta over the last week was 0.87, meaning our cases continue to trend down. There are currently active alerts or outbreaks in 313 schools, or about 13% of all schools in the province. These schools have had a combined total of 844 cases since January 11th. Hospitalizations continue to decline, which is positive news as it relieves pressure on our healthcare system.
As for the COVID-19 vaccine, Hinshaw says more than 120,000 doses have now been administered across the province. More than 29,000 Albertans have been fully immunized with 2 doses. Ontario is reporting 33 new COVID-related deaths, along with 1,265 new cases today. The province announced its reopening plans, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced that he will let the state of emergency declared last month to expire tomorrow. The stay-at-home order, however, remains in effect for at least 3 more weeks. Ontario has been in lockdown since Boxing Day. Meanwhile, in Quebec, that province saw 17 more deaths attributed to the novel coronavirus, along with 853 new cases. The province is easing its COVID-19 restrictions, allowing non-essential stores, salons, and museums to reopen. The Manitoba government says it will expand rapid COVID-19 testing for asymptomatic staff members to include around 40 personal care homes. Health and Seniors Care Minister Heather Stephenson says the decision follows increased cases at 3 care homes over a 4-week period. A church in Steinback, Manitoba held an indoor service again on Sunday, breaching the province's public health orders. Indoor religious gatherings are not allowed in the province under measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. Reports say there were around 30 vehicles at the Church of God Restoration's parking lot and at least 80 people walking out of the church. No one in the online feed of the service wore a mask or physically distanced. The church has already been fined once, and Pastor Tobias Tisson has been handed out at least 2 $1,300 penalties. The Edmonton Football Club in the CFL has come up with a short list of candidates for its new team name. The club dropped the name Eskimos last year. It followed a similar decision by the NFL's Washington team, which dropped the name Redskins, many thought to be racist and stereotypical. Cleveland's baseball team also said it would be eliminating its team name, the Indians. As for the Edmonton Football Club, here is the list that they've come out with. The Edmonton Elk, Elkhounds, Evergolds, Evergreens, Eclipse, Eagles, and Elements are all being considered by the club. The team is asking fans to rate the names and will take the results into account after the survey concludes on Sunday. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the new Super Bowl champions. The fans were celebrating the team's 31-9 victory over the Kansas City Chiefs last night, giving Tom Brady his 7th championship.
We're here because this is a phenomenal moment. I was here back in '03. We were only able to make it to Del Mabry. We are glad to actually be at the stadium with this victory. Yes, sir. This is amazing.
So I'm a physician assistant. I work in the emergency room. So yeah, they had us enter a lottery because we were frontline workers, and I just got lucky enough to get a ticket. And here I am. I never thought I'd be here in a million years.
It's crazy to me that Brady just comes and wins the Super Bowl whenever he feels like it. Like, that just kind of blows my mind.
Congrats to Tom Brady and the Bucs winning the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and they said he was too old in New England. Environment Canada issued an extreme cold warning for much of our region today, but how long will it last? A look at the long-range forecast is coming up shortly. This is what many of us had to deal with across southwestern Alberta today. Very cold temperatures below -25. Environment Canada issued an extreme cold warning for our region today. Wind chills and values dipping below -40. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather picture. Jeanette, how long is this cold winter snap supposed to last?
Well, Hal, this prolonged cold snap is expected to last into at least this coming weekend with some moderations in temperature, particularly throughout the day. But we are looking at some extreme wind chill values of between minus 30 and minus 50 at times. Risk of frostbite is also expected, so definitely bundle up, stay warm. Absolutely. Into tonight, 30% chance of light flurries. Look at that overnight low, minus 30. Could feel colder with the wind chill. Into tomorrow, our high on Tuesday, minus 24. With the wind chill value, could feel more like closer to minus 30. Those light flurries that I mentioned overnight, the sprinkling of flurries, could clear up by Tuesday morning. Mix of sun and cloud expected tomorrow. Same thing for Wednesday, minus 27, our high for Wednesday and Thursday. And then it's going to warm up a little bit for Friday, minus 19. But sunny skies, that's the good news, right? Thursday, Friday, right through the weekend. Sunny skies, but quite cold temperatures, minus 10 by Sunday. That looks like our warmest day of the week. So like I said, definitely stay warm. We are certainly outside of this range now, which is the average highs and lows for this time of year. Average lows, minus 12. Well, at this point, we would take that. Average high, 1 degree. 17 was our high temperature back in 1954. And in 1994, it was a chilly minus 37. 7:53 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset this evening, 5:38 p.m. So it's nice to see that getting closer to the 6 o'clock hour. So let's take a look at our highs across the nation tomorrow. Over on the west coast, beautiful, 3 degrees. Victoria could get a little bit of windy in the Harrow Strait there. Sunshine, Vancouver, high of 2 degrees. Minus 25 in Edmonton tomorrow, minus 23 for Calgary. So all of Alberta is experiencing that extreme cold snap with risk of frostbite and high wind chill values. Same thing for the rest of the prairies. That Arctic ridge of high pressure is covering over the mainly southern Manitoba and Saskatchewan, bringing with it extreme cold. Look at those temperatures, minus 27 in Regina, minus 26 in Saskatoon. They could get a little light dusting of flurries there as well. Over in Toronto, minus 1 the high. Chance of flurries there, minus 5 in Ottawa, minus 7 in Montreal. Those temperatures are looking mighty balmy compared to those of us out here in Alberta. Over in Fredericton, minus 6 the high with lots of sunshine. Sunny days also expected in Halifax, minus 2. Sunshine in Charlottetown. They did have a winter storm warning in effect that has now ended, but there is one for St. John's. They're going to be getting extreme heavy snowfall tonight. Into tomorrow, another 2 centimeters and blowing snow expected. High winds up to 80 kilometers per hour. There you go. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Supplements King in Red Deer and Lethbridge, Canada's workout and nutrition products retailer.
CP Rail says grain shipments in January set a new record as they jumped 6% over the same period last year. The railway says it carried 2.2 million metric tons of Canadian grain and grain products last month. It says it has shipped 16 million metric tons of Canadian grain and grain products in the 2020-2021 crop year so far. That is more than 13% over the same period a year earlier. The parent company of Second Cup is selling the coffee chain to Montreal-based Foodtastic for $14 million in cash. Mississauga-based Aegis Brand says the deal also includes a post-closing earnout. The company says the deal will allow it to focus on developing its Bridgehead coffee brand along with new acquisition opportunities. Foodtastic says it's excited about the acquisition of Second Cup, which has been a Canadian staple for almost 45 years. Tesla says it has invested $1.5 billion in Bitcoin and will accept the digital currency as payment for its electric vehicles. The company says its board approved of the investment and will potentially invest more in the future. Elon Musk's company says it will begin accepting Bitcoin as payment for its high-end cars, subject to applicable laws. The digital currency jumped more than 14% on the news, reaching an all-time high of more than $44,000 US for one Bitcoin. Hasbro says board game sales jumped 21% in the fourth quarter due to the holiday shopping season and more people staying at home during the pandemic. The toy company's Monopoly and Magic the Gathering card game were strong performers in the quarter, along with the classic game Dungeons & Dragons. Total revenue climbed 4% to $1.72 billion, just slightly ahead of the $1.7 billion that analysts were expecting. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 194 points in the day to finish at 18,330. The Dow was up 237 points to 31,386. The S&P 500 was up 28 points to 3916, and the Nasdaq was up 131 on the day to 13,988. West Texas Intermediate oil was up $1.22 to $58.07 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 2 cents to $2.88 US. Gold was up 5 cents to $18.30.86 US an ounce. And silver was even on the day at $27.27 US an ounce. Wheat is at $307 per metric ton, barley's at $310, canola's at $6.95, and corn is at $342 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 15 cents to $116.58, feeder cattle were down 83 cents to $137.45, and lean hogs were up $1.20 to $72.18. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $78.48 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government has reinstated the 1976 Peter Lawheed coal policy. This was after hearing concerns raised by Albertans about surface mining in the eastern slopes of the Canadian Rockies. The UCP government quietly rescinded the policy last May without public consultation. The Minister of Energy, Sonia Savage, also issued a directive to the Alberta Energy Regulator so that no mountaintop removal will be permitted and all of the restrictions under the 1976 coal categories are to apply, including restrictions on surface mining in Category 2 lands. During the pandemic, there's a fine line between protecting us from the novel coronavirus and infringing on our rights and freedoms. Now that's according to a Calgary lawyer, John Carpe. Coming up, he's the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, and Mr. Carpe will discuss how Canadians' rights are being trampled on and what his group is doing about it. That informative interview is on deck. The hotly contested debates over whether or not to keep COVID-19 lockdowns in place continues across Canada. Our guest today joins me now from Calgary via Zoom. John Carpe is the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. John, you're launching legal action against the federal government over the fact that Canadian residents will be required to quarantine at their own expense after returning from international travel, regardless of their negative COVID-19 status. Can you explain?
Since late January, the Justice Centre has been contacted by people all across Canada that are being forcibly detained, even in some cases with a negative COVID test, and they have no access to a lawyer. They're taken to a secret location. They're cut off from their family. Their family is not allowed to know where they are, not allowed to speak with each other by telephone. And the detention, the imprisonment, is not reviewed by a judge, which is normally what happens when if the police lock you up because you're, accused of shoplifting or even accused of murder. If you're detained somewhere, it goes before a judge for a ruling as to whether the detention can continue or whether you should be allowed out until the time of your trial. So right now in Canada, somebody accused of murder has more legal rights than a Canadian coming back to Canada on an airplane.
That is very concerning. There are cases where Canadian families are telling you that their loved ones who've returned from overseas are being held at federal isolation sites. The government is refusing to tell husbands or wives where these sites are, how we can contact them. John, how is this happening in our country, in Canada?
I think it's just the fanatical extremist attitude that says that, it doesn't matter what we do, as long as we're fighting against COVID, everything's okay. We've got no rights, no freedoms, any amount of unemployment or the suffering that people experience when they're forced into isolation, or mental health harm on children, or drug overdoses, suicides. There's this attitude like it doesn't matter because even if it saves one life, it's worth it. And there's just an unfounded fear of the virus that's not grounded in reality, because anybody who takes the time to actually look at the government data and the government statistics will know that this is not the unusually deadly killer that we were told about back in March of 2020. So it's the fear factor that causes a lot of respect for our basic human rights and fundamental freedoms and human dignity. And sadly, there are some Canadians think it's just fine for the government to lock up people, even when there's no reason why they cannot quarantine at home.
Now, if Canadian citizens are being held against their will by their own government without even having committed a crime, doesn't it make sense that any human being should at very least have access to a lawyer?
It should, and it does under the charter. This is why the government now seems to be backtracking a little bit on its policy. But in the meantime, we're still moving ahead on getting our court action ready, because when the policy actually becomes law officially, that's when we're going to take it to court.
What's interesting, we recently interviewed an Edmonton couple, the Mathis family. Nicole came back from Dallas, Texas to the Calgary airport. She was whisked away. And again, her husband, like, what's going on? You know, the people who took her away, the police didn't tell her husband exactly where they were taking her to this isolation facility. Turned out she had the wrong COVID test. She had the antigen test when instead it should have been the PCR test. So instances like this, we're hearing it over and over again, John. Can people like the Mathis family sue the federal government?
Well, the Mathis family, Nikki Mathis is one of our clients, and we're going to have, we're already at a half dozen clients, and we're getting more emails, so the number will be larger. So we are going to sue at least over what's happened in the past, so we can get a proper court declaration that what happened was an unjustified violation of Nikki Mathis's charter freedoms. But the other part of the court action would be to challenge the policy itself. Now, if the government really cleans up its act, you know, the second part of it might not be necessary. But you mentioned the PCR tests. There are medical experts and infectious disease specialists who question the legitimacy of the PCR tests, that they were never designed to diagnose COVID, and they're just not accurate or reliable. So this is another thing we'll bring up in court. Why is the federal government relying on tests that are not accurate and not reliable as a basis to deprive people of their liberty? And this part of your basic human dignity is your freedom to go where you want, when you want, to be out and about, to not be locked up somewhere is a very important charter freedom.
John Carpe is the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining me right now from Calgary. John, let's talk about what's happening in Quebec. A curfew has been imposed. People are basically under house arrest. Is this constitutional or even legal?
No, and we have the same lack of science. The Premier of Quebec was asked during a news conference whether this 8 p.m. curfew was going to really make a difference in terms of the spread of the virus. And his response was, we don't know. So here you have this kind of fanatical extremist attitude that, you know, even if something, we don't even know for sure if it's going to help, but we're going to lock you up in your house, even though we don't know if it's going to be helpful. But the science tells us that COVID does not spread outdoors. And it's also rather ridiculous to think that COVID spreads more quickly, more dangerously after 8 p.m. I mean, there's absolutely no science for keeping people locked up in their houses and issuing tickets and arresting and charging people for being outside of their own home after 8 o'clock. There's just no reason for it. There's no validity to it. It's unscientific. And yet a lot of Canadians support this because they're terrified of the virus. And so anything, even something useless and unscientific, anything that might possibly perhaps help, we should just pursue it. And there's this utter lack of respect for our human dignity and fundamental freedoms. So we're turning into a police state and a medical dictatorship. We're 11 months into this. And there's no reason to think that, you know, by June or September or next Christmas that we're going to be out of this.
You know, I used to work up in Ottawa on Parliament Hill as a national parliamentary reporter for the Sun News Network, the now defunct SNN. And I kept in contact with a lot of my friends in the media in Ottawa on the Hill there. And one of my friends, he's a shooter editor, a video journalist, Mark, he was out at a skating rink outside in Ottawa by himself wearing his mask. Like, why are you wearing your mask? Like, there's nobody around you to physically do. No, we're supposed to, Hal. You're supposed to wear the mask. Even outside when there's nobody around you? So, I mean, maybe the fear is in a lot of people, including the media. Now, let's talk about the mainstream media. You know, they still seem to be very supportive of the lockdown measures, John, but I've noticed more stories from medical professionals who are voicing concerns about the negative effects of the lockdowns. And I mean, they can't be really good for our mental, spiritual, or physical health.
No, and that's one thing I'm thankful for, because unfortunately the mainstream media are a pro-lockdown propaganda machine. They frighten people with citing all these numbers of so-called cases, but in fact, in the use of the English language prior to March of 2020, a case meant a sick person. And so you'd say there are, 10,000 cases of breast cancer in Canada. That would mean 10,000 people who actually had breast cancer. Or if there was, 50,000 cases of the annual flu, it meant 50,000 people who were actually sick. And for a lot of people, a case still means a sick person, because it did until March. And this is a twisting of the English language, because the media talks about COVID cases. These are not sick people. These are people with a positive result on the PCR test. But for every 1,000 so-called cases, there's about 30 sick people that need to be in hospital. So even these media headlines are fear-mongering. But on the positive side, more and more doctors, bit by bit by bit, you get more and more doctors that are saying, look, we've got, serious mental health problems in children who are living in a state of fear, who are told that if they get within 6 feet of a person that they might kill their grandmother, which is completely false. And you've got more and more data coming out on cancer deaths, because you've got the MRIs and CT scans that are being shut down to as part of the lockdown measures. So now when people are finding out way too late, oh, you've got cancer, but if you'd had a timely test, it would have been stage 1. But now it's like, oh, well, I'm sorry, you've got stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 cancer. And you don't need to be a doctor to know that cancer spreads and it gets worse and it needs to get caught early. And so all of these lockdown harms, the doctors are pointing to them more and more. And I hope that those will be wake-up calls for people that, even if COVID was a super scary, super dangerous virus, which it is not, but even if it was, the amount of harm that lockdowns are inflicting is just killing more people than what COVID does.
Now, gym owners are really angry right now that they're not being allowed to fully reopen. Do they have any legal options?
Well, the Justice Centre has taken the governments of British Columbia, Alberta, and Manitoba to court, and we will also be taking Saskatchewan and Ontario to court. Unfortunately, those court actions, this is terrible, but it takes 2 years, 3 years, 4 years before you eventually get a ruling. So right now, the gym owners, their choice is to comply or to open up and risk what I imagine, depending on which province, are very hefty fines. But there's no scientific justification for this. Typically, the people threatened by COVID, the people who should be afraid would be if you're 82 years old and you're in a nursing home and you're already dying of cancer, heart disease, emphysema, diabetes, whatever other illnesses, then you should be worried. These are not the same people who are going to the gym. People going to the gym, if you're healthy enough to go to the gym, you're not in the high risk category of catching COVID or dying of COVID. So there's no scientific basis for keeping gyms closed. And this is bankrupting good, honest business people that are trying to earn a living. And the government's effectively putting many of them out of business, and it's cruel.
Now, there is a slight restriction being lifted here in Alberta where you can do one-on-one training with your trainer at the gym, but the trainer has to wear a mask. But as for letting everybody back into the gym, no, not yet. So, John, how do provincial governments decide who can and cannot open? The complaint from small business owners who I've interviewed that they've had to shut down and they may be going under is that maybe there are different rules that apply for the big box stores that are allowed to open.
Walmart's never been closed since March of 2020. And that's where people congregate. And, if you are trying to get people to be not in touch with each other as much, which again, the virus is not a threat to 90% of Canadians. So there's no reason for 90% of people to live in fear. But if you are trying to disperse people into as many different businesses as possible, the best way to do that is to let all businesses be open and to let all businesses pick whatever hours they want. That's where you're really going to spread people out so you don't have people close together. But in a lot of provinces, you've got everybody packing into the food section of Walmart. and all these other places are being unfairly punished. And so these distinctions are arbitrary, and we're still waiting on politicians to come up with some actual evidence that would suggest that these lockdowns are saving any lives. I've been watching this closely for over 10 months, and there's no evidence that I've seen that anybody's put forward. People assert, the politicians assert that lockdowns are saving lives, but that's not providing evidence. That's just making an assertion.
John, do you have any updates now on the churches and how they're doing in their legal battles, such as what's happening with the Trinity Bible Chapel in Ontario?
Trinity Bible Chapel is taking the rap, taking the heat on behalf of a lot of other churches, because they have said that it's fundamentally important for them to minister to their community and minister to the congregants, to the worshipers, to the believers. For a lot of people, church is their only family. I mean, a lot of people are living with, a husband or wife or kids or parents or whatever, but a lot of Canadians are not. And this is their only chance for some in-person contact. And so the government is threatening contempt of court and millions of dollars of fines. And very courageously, the church is staying open in spite of those threats. So that's in Ontario. In British Columbia, we're going to court March 1st because we have a court action on behalf of churches, and we're pointing out just the hypocrisy and inconsistency of allowing restaurants to be open and strangers can go in and eat in restaurants, but churches must be totally closed, even with seating restrictions and this and that. They're not allowed to open at all in British Columbia, and there's no rational or scientific basis for that.
The persecution of the church continues even in the 21st century. John Carpace, the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, thanks for joining me today from Calgary.
Good to be with you, Hal.
Streets Alive mission has been making a big difference here in our community for over 30 years. The amazing ministry helps many of our homeless in our community, including those with addictions. They feed them, clothe them, and help them get on their feet in a very big way. Joining me to talk about it is the co-founder of Streets Alive mission, Julie Kissick. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Julie.
Well, thank you, Hal. Good to be here.
So 30 years, 3 decades, does it feel like it?
Well, my hair says it's been 30 years, but it hasn't felt like 30 years at all for me. I look back at 30 years and it feels like just a short span of time because I love what I do. We absolutely love what we do. We feel called to do what we do. And so when you get up every morning and you love doing what you're doing, it does not feel like drudgery. It doesn't feel long.
You know, a few years ago, you took me on a tour of Streets Alive inside, and it really touched my heart in a big way. You showed me this mural with a lot of the clients on the mural. You knew the backstory, you know all about their lives, you remember their names, and most of those people had passed away. Mm-hmm. And I remember you had tears in your eyes as well at that moment.
Oh, some of those people became very important to us.
It's like family, right?
And they become like family because you do know them so well, and because you bury their children and you bury their parents and you bury all their aunties and uncles, and you hold them when they cry and you celebrate when they're having a good day, and they're just like our family.
Now, during the lockdown, Streets Alive did not close the doors but kept them open to help those who were desperately in need. How was that received in the community?
I think it was received really well. We were one of the few places that was open for them to come into, but one of the important things is that we trustee their money, and so nobody wants to separate anybody from the funds that they have, number one, and they still need clean clothes, and they still need a sandwich, and they still need a phone, and they still need to have that connection with people.
So what protocols, Julie, did you and Ken put in place at Streets Alive to protect yourselves, your volunteers, and your clients from COVID-19?
Well, here's the funny thing. We were told we had to use a lot of hand sanitizer, but they drink it. So
wow.
The first thing we did is
because the alcohol content, I guess, in there, right?
Sure. And now they come in Mickeys and 40s and stuff like that, so it's like very attractive. But we opened up a hand washing station, we opened a bathroom, took the toilet out, and just nobody could have any kind of a service unless they wash their hands. And of course, the staff is masked, and we offer masks to all of the clientele that come through the door. So if they want to access our service, they have to wash up their hands and wear a mask.
Now, one of the branches of your ministry is the new Segway Women's House. What is your real vision for this home?
How much time do you have?
Well, we've got another 10
another
minutes
47
or so.
seconds.
Yeah.
The vision that I have for this home is to have a place for women who have nowhere else to go. I was volunteering in the jail right up until COVID, and time after time women would be leaving my chapel service crying because they had nowhere to go except back to their old situation. And they come out of detox, they have nowhere to go but back to the old situation, or treatment, back to the old situation. And I wanted to be able to offer them an alternative until they were healthy enough to maybe even face the old situation. And so it's imperative when we help people in recovery that they have a home. They have to have a roof. If you don't have a roof, you don't have the opportunity to recover. If you don't have a bed, if you don't have 3 squares, you have no opportunity to recover. So
how do you get that message across to a lot of your clients that you have to change your surroundings, you have to change your bad habits, and even some of the people you hang out with, which is very difficult for a lot of people, especially if they've been on the streets with a lot of these other people they call friends, right?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge to help them get to that place where they're able to say goodbye, because we could force it, but we all know the law kills. Or we could talk to them, and through the programming and instruction and perspective change, they get to the place where they kind of go, hey, you're unhealthy and toxic for me, so I'm going to actually choose not to be with you. And when they get to that point, that's a powerful point in their life.
And don't you have some staff or volunteers that help out that maybe went through the program, that were homeless or addicted at one point in time?
Oh yeah, we're up to armpits
Success
in
stories,
them.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and now, like through COVID, we still continue to do our supportive housing, and the men and the women who were in the housing were just so grateful that they had a job to do while we went through that, and they became the big supporters of people that were coming to all the services. They were just like, hey, I made it, you can make it. I've done this for 6 months, you can do it for 6 days, and it's just been amazing.
Now, Streets Alive is a ministry very similar to what we have here at the Miracle Channel. How do you integrate God and Christ's saving grace into the discussion when it comes to helping people off the street?
Well, I think that we're fortunate in that people know we are a Christian mission. And so there's a certain expectation that Christianity is going to come out of our mouth. They have an expectation when I sit up beside them and I'm like, hey, can I pray for you? They expect that. And then they always say yes. And my prayer is always that God would touch their heart with his love so that they could have hope to change. Because love changes everything.
So, Julie, what's needed right now?
Besides money?
Yeah, well, we can always use money, right?
Yeah, we can
how
always
about
use
clothing?
money.
Winter's just around the corner.
Hoodies. For Streets Alive, hoodies, we always need jeans. No matter how many times we get jeans, they disappear like that. When you think that we might serve 25 to 40 people per day, that's 25 to 40 pairs of pants, shirts, socks, underwear. So we're always out of underwear. We don't like secondhand underwear. We like fresh, clean underwear. Walmart has a great deal, just throw that out there. We always need hoodies so they can layer up. We always need jeans, usually men's 30 to 34.
Socks?
Socks all day long, because they get to change their socks every day. We can't change their shoes every day, but we can change their socks every day.
What about gloves and tubes
Gloves,
and scarves?
that's coming up.
Right?
But yeah, I think last year we went through 6,000 or 7,000 pairs of gloves.
The government likes to keep tabs on numbers, like Stats Canada. 30 years, how many clients do you think you have served with Streets Alive?
A lot? I don't know. It's just a lot. It's been a lot.
How many would you average a day, through the programs?
Through the programs and the trusteeship, about 150 a day.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you're also developing an 8-plex home for men.
Yeah, excited.
What are some of the needs there?
Everything. We need everything there. We do have a fair amount of furniture because we've been collecting furniture with our warehouse. And so we let agencies have their first pick of everything, and then we have enough to probably be able to share a little bit into that 8-plex. But same thing, we don't have dishes, bath towels, tea towels, laundry soap, cushions, Chesterfields, chair, like everything. We need everything. And it's an 8-plex, and each plex has 2 bedrooms. So that's 16 bedrooms that we have to furnish.
Julie, the supervised consumption site at Arches shut down after the province did its audit, the $1.6 million in funds that weren't accounted for, so the province shut it down. Now the province instituted a mobile SES by the Soup Kitchen in Lethbridge here. Is the province doing enough to help a lot of those who are addicted? It's not called
an SCS anymore. It's called an opioid prevention site.
Right.
And so the SCS allowed all kinds of different drug use, whereas the OPS is intravenous drug use. Okay. So that's probably narrowed the field a little bit. I have an opinion regarding intravenous drug use. I pretty much keep it to myself because
This is the forum, come on.
I've seen too many dead people.
Okay.
I've seen too many people die from putting poison in their veins, but I understand the concept of it.
So how do you feel about people like Tim Slaney, used to work at Arches with the Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society, putting up these pop-up tents at Galt Gardens, down by the Civic Center, the field?
I think that
they're unsanctioned.
I think that he should encourage the people to go to the proper OPS site because they've got medical staff there, they've got social workers, they've got addiction workers, they've got everything set up there to help the person from point A to point B instead of just getting stuck at point A. So I think they're actually doing a disservice to the addicted population.
Let's talk about for a moment the importance of providing a safe place for people as they go through recovery. Tell me a bit about that, how important that is.
It is so important that it is safe, but also that it is structured. There has to be a purpose while they're living that safe existence. So we do a lot of psychoeducational stuff, we do a lot of 12-step stuff, we do boundary work, we do all the work that is necessary for them to be able to find their own place of safety after they've been safe with us. So that's our goal, is like recovery is real, we've seen it, it works, and we know how to help people get to point B.
Julie, do you in Canada Streets Alive see a lot of transient people coming in from other towns or cities, or is it mostly local people here in southwestern Alberta?
Well, we saw, a year or so ago, we saw a fairly significant influx from other centers, and part of it was the SCS.
Like other centers, meaning from Calgary?
Yeah.
Or?
Oh, yeah. We saw lots of different people because we would see they would come in for clothing. We'd be like, "Where are you from? What's your name?" So we saw all these strange people we didn't know come into the building, and we've also seen lately that some of them have transitioned back, possibly to old stomping grounds or whatever. So,
let's talk about some of the victories that you've seen as well, involving your clients. I mean, we mentioned some of them before who went on to become volunteers or work with you here at Streets Alive, but just some of those tremendous victories.
One or two of the victories that I think of right away is one lady who came to us out of detox, so she'd only been, detoxed for 7 days, and we put her in the house and she stayed with us for 2 years. So the first year she worked her way through all of our programming, and the second year she started at the university taking her social working and addictions degree. And by the time she left, she was already a year into that degree, going strong, stable, able to function and do really well. I'm in contact with women who have exited the housing and are back working in their jobs. They've got their kids back working with their kids. So I hear from a lot of the people that have exited the program in a healthy and safe way. We do have some that exit in a not very healthy and safe way, but we do have a significant amount that still stay in touch, and they've gone on to live the lives that they had hoped they could have.
I've chatted with some members of the Lethbridge Police Department here, and they say a big issue right now when it comes to the drugs, it's not so much fentanyl, but it's methamphetamine.
Meth.
Are you seeing that as well?
Well, about 10 years ago, we saw a huge increase in meth, and back then, the people called it meth bridge. Like, I know it's just been coined within the last year or two, but we heard it 10 years ago, this is meth bridge. We saw people transition from pills and alcohol and stuff into meth. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we watched them transition their meth to take it intravenously. So yeah, meth is the key drug in our city.
Now, you talked about opioids as well, do you have naloxone kits there too?
Of course.
You have to have lots of those on hand?
Yeah, on hand and with our outreach team.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, we've just contracted to have a special counselor come into Streets Alive to help them decompress from overdoses. And it was worse about a month ago, but still they have to be able to have somewhere where they can start to talk about somebody just coming back to life and taking a swing at them.
Wow. What kind of training do your volunteers have to go through in order to be able to handle a lot of what they're seeing?
I wish I could remember the term, but our operations director, he does a non-violent intervention course that he runs with our staff like every year or every 6 months, however he sees that needs to happen, so that we learn not to engage up close and personal, but how to de-escalate situations. So, but I'll say with meth, it's hard.
I can imagine.
They're just so amped up on the speed, and that sometimes they don't even hear your voice.
Wow.
So the best time for us to reach out to them is when they're starting to come down off the meth, and yeah.
So in your opinion, how can we curtail a lot of the drug use in our city and keep the drugs out of our city?
You know, we've had a lot of people say, how can we get drugs out of our city? Well, they tried prohibition with the alcohol, and we all know how that worked. Everything went underground. And I think that the drug use is with us until the end of time, because there are always going to be people who are hurt and looking for an anesthetic. And as long
And they're trying
as,
to fill that void.
and they're trying
not with
to fill
God,
that,
but with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, they have. They don't know how to go to God. They don't know how to accept His love and let that love work with them, because that's a slow process, and they want the fast process. They want the drug that's going to just take a hold of them, make them feel better instantly. So
quick fix.
It is, and it's a powerful fix. Wow. So for people to just say, well, just stop using, it is just not that easy.
Julie Kissick, co-founder of Streets Alive Mission here in Lethbridge, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.